"You want to be set free? I'll set you free." And he pulled out a hatchet. He was going to choke me. And he started to choke. I started kicking and screaming, hoping someone would hear me.
Hello, everybody. This is Greg Stewart with Stewing the Pot. And today's podcast, is very intriguing to me for several reasons. One, we're going to talk about a crime that happened back in the 70s. Now, I don't know how often people do it today, but back in the 70s, 80s, and maybe even the early 90s, but definitely in the 70s and the 80s, hitchhiking was a thing that people did to get from point A to point B. I don't see it or hear about it as much these days, but back when I was a young person, it was a very big thing. People did it to get from point A to point B. And that's the storyline. That's where this begins for a young lady of 15 years of age in California and around the early 70s. Her name is Mary Vincent, and she decides to run away from home. She hitchhikes and she's picked up by an individual. Now, when she was hitchhiking and the location that she was in, she had three other people that were standing behind her that were also hitchhiking. And a man pulls up in a van that appeared empty, at least when he opened the door. And yet he said, "I only have room for one." And she was in the front where he pulled up. So she entered. But even then, it caused her to have a red flag. But I think it's best for you to hear the story from her. Here's an audio reference to Mary Vincent on how that day transpired for her and the crime that unfortunately happens. Though she is a survivor in this, but is she? And you'll find out what I mean from what she develops in reference to a PTSD because of what the toll took on her, not just for the crime, but what it left her with. But go ahead and listen to this audio clip in reference to the situation that she had to deal with.
Back then, hitchhiking was a really big thing, so there were people everywhere with signs and, saying, "I'm going here, I'm going there." And I had a sign saying that I was going south, and a man pulled up in a blue van. There were two other people behind me who had the same sign, going in the same general direction. And when the man pulled up, they noticed he had an empty van. There was nothing in the back, but he said he only had room for one person. The other two people behind me said, "You shouldn't go in there. If he's not willing to take other people and just a female, that's not the safest bet." But at the time, I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't a daredevil or anything. I was just desperate to get home. I could not live another day out alone. Think about what type of person he was or the situation. I was tired. And he seemed like a grandfather type figure. I was just so exhausted, I dozed off for a little bit. And when I woke up, I noticed that the signs were different and they were heading in the opposite direction. And I picked it up and said, "Look, you're going the wrong way, and you know you're going the wrong way." He pulled over in the middle of a deserted road. I then thought, well, I'm in trouble. And I looked down and noticed my tennis shoe was untied. Now, if I'm going to be able to outrun this person because I'm young, he's old, I'm healthy, he's not. I better tie my shoe. So I opened up the passenger door, got out to tie my shoe. That's when a sledgehammer hit me on the head.
So at this point, Mary gets hit with a sledgehammer and she's knocked unconscious. When she wakes up, she finds him looking over her and she's tied up at this point. And if you could think the worst at this point of what can happen to a person prior to someone trying to kill them, well, I don't want to get into the imagery of this unbelievable, horrible crime. And then after that, what takes place is, of course, him taking off her arms, him cutting her limbs from the elbow down, and you get the rest of the results there. And as the story goes, she gets away, and she's going to tell you how with this audio clip here.
And he pulled out a hatchet from his toolbox and took my left arm and took one swing, and I started to fall. And then he took another swing, and I grabbed his arm, grabbed it real tight, and I couldn't figure out, I'm holding him real tight on his arm, but I'm still falling. I looked down at my arm, and there was nothing, just blood squirting out. And he then took my right arm, and I started kicking and screaming, hoping someone would hear me, and I'm just kicking nonstop. And he started to chop my right arm off, but because I'm still kicking and screaming, it took longer, so he had to keep chopping away at my arm. He started to drag me, and I think he thought I was dead, because I just lay still and didn't move. And he threw me off a 30-foot cliff. I just didn't know he drove off. I didn't know if he was waiting or what, but I just laid there, bleeding to death. And I got tired. I got really sleepy and cold. And all I wanted to do was go to sleep. But all I heard was a voice saying that I can't go to sleep. He's gonna do this to somebody else. And I can't let that happen. That's what was going through my heart, my mind, and my soul. And I couldn't have him do that to another girl. I stuck my arms in the dirt to pat my arms so that they won't bleed so much, and the dirt would act like mud and it'll stop some of the bleeding. I crawled back up the cliff without any hands. It was dark. It was very, very dark. And I could barely see. I mean, had it not been for the moon or the stars, I wouldn't have been able to see anything. But I could hear the faint sound of traffic somewhere over the hill. Like, there has to be a freeway somewhere. I'll just follow that noise. I just walked until it started getting daylight. And the first car that came, It was a red car with no top on it. It was one of those sporty type cars. And there were two guys that were driving it. It says, help me, help me. But, I mean, think about it. I have no hands now, and I'm covered from head to toe in blood. I look like something from a Fright Night movie. And they took off. So all I could think of was, I'm gonna die out here. Because everyone's too afraid to even stop. So I kept walking in the middle of the road. And that's when the second person came, and it was a honeymoon couple that had gotten lost. They just tried to help me up into the truck, and it said, lay still, we'll get you there, and they raced really fast. I mean, it was an old truck, but I could hear the wheels peeling out. They were able to get to a phone to call the paramedics. I lost over half the blood in my body, and the rest of the blood in my body got to a toxic level. But my body took it, because I guess I was that desperate to live. I was scared, because he was just a few feet from me when I was in the witness stand. He was only like 10, 15 feet from me.
So that is the story of what happened to this poor woman, Mary Vincent. And watching the video, if you noticed the little black and white cartoon pictures of this man, and a lot of the reasons why we use cartoon is because the copyright laws don't allow us to actually use the real pictures of some of these or most of these individuals, and for good reason in some of these cases. But this gentleman who, I don't even, that's being way too kind, this crazed lunatic sounds more like it, Larry Singleton. Now, the unfortunate thing of everything, as if this wasn't bad enough for this poor young lady at the time, now a woman who was still suffering, Mary Vincent. And one of the key factors is that Larry only did as a maximum during that time in California 14 years in prison. 14 years, and they let this psychopath out. And the reason behind it was the maximum sentence for the offenses he was convicted of under the laws at the time was 14 years and 4 months. This sentence included terms for attempted murder, rape, and other related charges. So, from the way it sounds like to me, if she passed away, okay, now we can put him on death row or give him basically a maximum of a lifetime sentence. So, unfortunately, there were no consecutive sentences at this time. And they let people out, in this case, Larry out, for good behavior due to prison overcrowding. Now, later events, Larry gets out and moves from California to Florida. And unfortunately to say, the state I live in does attract the most crazed, unusual, sadistic serial killers or animals such as Larry. Well, he did it again. And he was sentenced to death at this point in 1998. But however, he died in prison before the execution date. Now, there was a law in California after his 14-year term, Larry, that he that the state of Florida, I should say, state of California, I'm sorry, this case always gets to me, but the state of California finally, after his 14 years, said, you know what? Any crime that ever happens like this again, death penalty, life in prison, one or the other, but definitely this has got to be mandatory. So if you had to find something to come out of it, animals like this get put away. And again, I feel choked up about this because as a person coaching, I also have background in hypnosis. And by the way, the reason why I'm bringing hypnosis up, when Mary Vincent was in court, at first she couldn't get a vision in her mind of Larry. She knew she went through all this, and maybe her mind went into protection mode to protect her, but she drew blank. What does this man look like? And, what is built like if you can't give us a face? She went completely blank. And this is one of the reasons also why I chose this case for the podcast, because of my background in hypnosis. And it was at this point they brought in a hypnotherapist, whether you believe they're a quack or what. This form of therapy helps the brain to relax, hence hypno meaning sleep, osis condition of. So they got the mind to relax and take her back, unfortunately, through a regression to where at least she can get a visualization of what this animal Larry looked like. And that's exactly what happened. And then she was able to get the composite sketch from the artist to draw it out, and they were able to finger Larry and bring him to justice. And the reason, again, why this touches me is I've never had any capacity of an animal like this in my work, but I did have an interesting case in the beginning years of my coaching. I had a man in his 70s, early 70s, maybe late 60s, early 70s, come in, very cocky feeling. You could just feel this peacock energy about him. And I said, what brings you in today? And he states, he goes, well, I have two 16-year-old twin daughters. I said, okay. And he goes, and my wife recently found out before we adopted these two teenagers a couple years back. She found out that prior to adoption that I had a history of something bad, and she got it out of me. And that bad thing was I this is all confidential, he says, right? And I said, go on. I never said yes or no. And he said, so I was accused back then of doing something I probably shouldn't to someone. I told my wife, but it never was found out. And he goes, I'm kind of a blank. I'm not sure. So he goes, that's why I didn't admit to it to her even then. So I think it was more of a fantasy. And he gets this weird smirk on his face. And then he says, let me ask you something. If I did something, because she wants me here and she wants the session recorded to find out, because they're not saying anything, our two adopted twins are not saying anything. And she promises that she won't go to the police. She just needs this for personal closure. But no psychologist was able to get me to admit to it. So that's why my wife told me to try hypnosis. And I see that you do this. And he goes, so I want to ask you, before I commit to this, he goes, do you really believe when other professionals in the behavioral work couldn't get this out of me, because I guess I am telling the truth, nothing really happened. It was more of a figment of my imagination. Do you think you can get it out of me through hypnosis? And I looked at him like I've never looked at anyone in my work. Like I definitely at that point took a personal stand against this animal in front of me. And I went in a very deep voice. It's like my body made a shift and I go, oh, absolutely. No question about it. I can definitely connect on something to state if your state did do something. and we can record it as your wife has requested in reference to this session. He got out of that chair so fast. He felt my vibe and ran out the door. And that's why this connects with me. That's why this work connects with me. Now, I went to my superior at the time and emphasized, I said, I know it's HIPAA. I know we can't violate this person's privacy. And I didn't get anything conclusive verbally, but it was obvious. And unfortunately, he said, you have nothing to play on in reference to this. He goes, it kills me as much to say it, as much as what you've experienced. But unfortunately, we have nothing to go on now. I hope with the energy of karma and life that he got his in reference to being caught or any of the above that can put him out of someone's world in the most legal of ways. But this animal should definitely be taken care of, and I hope he was from the law enforcement and the authorities. But moving on, at least a law was passed in California for Mary, and at least now, even in most states, that people will get at the minimum. I wish it could be the other things, but life in prison. So I hope this very deep, powerful message in reference to this podcast and the episode that it was in reference to Mary, I hope this was helpful to you and for you. And this is what we want to do here at Stewing the Pot. We want to utilize this platform, utilize some of my coaching in reference to if I could give any tools, like I do hypnotherapist, it connected with me, my previous sessions in reference to podcast also emphasizes at least my goal is one tool to give you per podcast that I utilize that maybe will help you or someone you know. So, thank you for stewing the pot with me. And it's really helpful. It's really meaningful, once again, to please like, subscribe, and share because my goal is to help individuals out there by bringing tools and these stories and trying to find, at least, if not through their story, through my stories of giving tools to help people out there have a breakthrough, have an outcome from all their suffering that they're going through, not just in reference to something this heinous and deep, but also in other areas of anxiety, personality disorders, any of the above, anything I can give a tool in reference to my coaching to bring the best out of you or bring someone to justice. That's what I'm hoping this program does. That's what I'm hoping these podcasts do. That's what I'm hoping these episodes do. So please, 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 please like us, subscribe, and share the message. Until next time, this is Greg Stewart with Stewing the Pot.